first, and I'd like to talk with our audience for a moment and explain why we're doing something called Residents First. We founded Myrtle Beach SC News 20 years ago, and we called ourselves Resident Focus News. A lot of people, we assumed, would get that. Well, they haven't. We're living in an age today where the rights of government and the rights of residents have kind of flipped over the last 50 years. And so when we write a news story or a news item, we tend to write it from the perspective of what's good for residents. Unfortunately, the way the process works with so many new people moving in here, that context gets lost. What are the rights of government? What are the rights of the individual? In our age today, we're not clear on that anymore. And it has a lot to do with the scope and size of government. Bureaucracy keeps growing. For every one person you elect at any level of government, city, state, county, federal, there are 148 bureaucrats for every one individual elected. So please understand that we've got more of a government-run country than we've ever had in our history. The larger government becomes, the more funding government needs. And so it becomes interesting to find solutions for government as to how they're going to fund themselves. So this is our first episode. We're going to be doing a lot of these. Well, what we're primarily going to be doing is enlightening people on all things resident first. That can go from recreation to sports to home and garden to whatever floats your boat. Today we're going to talk about development because it's a key issue in our county. Development is one of the key concerns and one of the key opportunities for the county of Horry. And we are the fastest growing county in the state. Today we have with us Katrina Morris. Hi, Katrina. Morrison, excuse me. Today we have with us Katrina Morrison. Hi, Katrina.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Katrina recently ran for Horry County Council, and she is quite informed on all things local Horry County as it relates to development, in my opinion.
Thank you.
So we were out, as many of you know today, we were out at the Legends golf community and filming some things going on there. We're also informed by Katrina of everything from Little River issues to issues down at Island Green.
West Perry, Lawns, which is Rum Bluff. So I think I have 11 developments on my list at the moment that are either problematic for flooding, problematic for wetlands. They're probably 10 times that problematic in the county, but these are ones that citizens have contacted me, excuse me, citizens affected by these areas or in these particular problematic developments have contacted me and asked for help. Now, we do have government that, a planning department, we have regulations, ordinances, we have a lot of things that would protect these individuals and citizens, but for whatever reason, there's a huge disconnect between the average person who's having a problem and who actually has the ability to help. That seems to be the big disconnect. So to start off with going to planning development or going to public safety or going to INR, people don't know these processes or know who to contact. And sometimes people just show up at a county council meeting and then they find out they actually can't speak. So you have to list yourself the week before to speak, and people get easily discouraged, which to me is surprising because I'm not easily discouraged, as you know. So I have been primarily trying to help people understand their rights and the process and procedures, whether it be planning commission, the fact that you can get information prior at the planning workshop. A big part of the problem in this whole development issue is that citizens are not informed. Citizens don't really understand what they can and can't do. Um, this is from my perspective anyway.
Who are usually the most informed people in the process as a rule?
Developers,
Developers are highly
engineers.
informed. Planning department is highly informed. Typically, well, let me just say this to our viewers. The 15 to 20 highest paid employees in Horry County typically work for government, county managers, city managers. I can go on and on. People who work in high level staff positions with planning and zoning. Now, they're very informed, are they not?
Definitely. You know, as you know, David Jordan is an attorney. I'm sure many people in the office are in.
Tell us who David Jordan is again.
So he is the head of planning, the planning department for Horry County.
And he has a legal degree.
I believe he does.
He does. So, when we talk about growth and development, is that a bad thing?
No. So you know, we have a very big county. Everyone knows this. If you don't know, land mass wise, we are the largest county east of the Mississippi.
It's true.
So our county is a huge, huge county, and there are plenty places to develop. Everyone talks about bringing a new industry and bringing, you know, better industry into Horry County. But I always question, why would we possibly want to bring it to the beach?
Well, here's the problem I see. You're right. Where there's a road called 905, there's a road 701 that goes out towards a town called Nichols, over to a town called area called Gallivan's Ferry. And that whole area could be developed.
And access to 95.
Correct.
Much easier than anywhere at this side of the county.
So, the problem with that though is there's currently no quick way to the beach from those areas, or as quick as the development officials would like.
So what I'm saying is, you know, I heard during the election campaign about an industrial park in North Myrtle Beach. Now, in my opinion, and again, it's my opinion, North Myrtle Beach has no place for an industrial park. North Myrtle Beach, like Little River, are meant for tourism. That is and has been the best outcome for these parts of the county, and certainly works well when it comes to making money. When you're talking about industry and you're talking about the need to be near 95, why on earth, because we don't have access to 95 easily at the moment.
No, we don't.
So wouldn't we be smarter in considering developing industrial issues or more corporate minded businesses closer to 95?
Well, there's a pink elephant in the room, and I'm going to just pop it. Katrina, to your knowledge, what's the biggest industry in Horry County?
Development.
Development. Guys, development does 38 with a billion. Development does $38 billion annually for our economy. Tourism does $3 billion annually. There really are no other jobs outside of government or government-related contracts to really participate in. I mean, you've got Horry County Schools, your largest employer, you've got development, and you've got tourism. Those are your three big employers.
And when we talk about how much money we're making in development, why on earth do we have a homeless population in this county? Why do we have the issues that would seem to be relatively fixable? Because with those issues, we have crime. We have a lot of other underlying issues that are not being addressed. While we're doing all this development, the support people who work at Walmart or work at Dunkin' Donuts or are just graduating high school, they can't afford to live here. They cannot afford to rent a place. Okay, so you live at home with your parents. But the situation is not getting better. We have an elderly population in Horry County, retired people, and the support people we need, doctors, staff in doctors' offices. If you're making $13 or $15 an hour, you cannot afford to live here.
Correct.
So where are all those people living, Longs, Loris, everywhere west of the waterway because they can't afford to live here. So spreading, and I am all for rural Horry County, so I don't want anyone to misunderstand that I want to develop rural areas. It's not that as much as it makes more sense to have better jobs. Those areas, when kids are graduating from high school, have no jobs.
Well, and the other issue is that, and just to call it what it is, most people want to live near the beach.
That's great, but
Now, we're running out of dry land to develop near the beach. Those are facts. What my grandfather in the 1930s and 40s would have called swampland, well, we were at Legends, we filmed that since the American Native Indians, even before that, those were swamps. And what happens, you take a swamp like this, what happens when you ditch it, drain it, dry it, and you run the water into a river like the Intercoastal Waterway or like into the Waccamaw, and you're doing it county-wide. You're draining and ditching every speck of swampland you can get. Now, we're talking millions of gallons of water that once used to sit and create an ecosystem. Well, now that's dry land.
Yeah.
How often can we do that before we start having problems?
Well, just look, and this was mentioned this past week at Horry County Council. If you look over at Rum Bluff, it's on 9, and if everybody who has been living here remembers Florence and what 9 looked like, it was entirely underwater. So
when you say Florence, you're talking about Hurricane Florence.
Hurricane Florence.
We were completely
2018.
underwater. In 2018, we were completely underwater all along that corridor.
Absolutely. So then they built new houses where that portion of Lawrence was clearly underwater. And if you look on a map, I find this astounding because this particular development is surrounded on 3 sides by water, not just wetlands. The Waccamaw is there. It bends around this particular, it looks like a little peninsula sticking into what will absolutely be underwater. So an individual had a house built. They were told that it was built up, right? So fill had been done.
So hold on. Explain, because we have to go all the way down to rudimentaries here. Explain to our viewers what fill and build is.
So when you had a flood, or you clearly know water will be at the location you're building, you build it up. You fill in 6, 8 feet, probably more on some cases, and you build a house. But what that does to the surrounding homes is make them lower and your house higher, and water takes the path of least resistance. So the higher house might not flood, but the surrounding homes that are lower definitely will flood.
So let's just say a home's been sitting in a neighborhood for 40 years, never had a flood, and suddenly a developer comes in and he does something called fill and build right next door.
Yep.
All of a sudden, now this older neighborhood is flooding.
And they have no recourse.
And they have no recourse, and they're confused, they're baffled.
Right.
We never flooded before, why are we suddenly flooding?
So, in law, if something escapes from your property, so a lot of people might think cattle, a dog, things like that. Water escapes from your property too, but when you're intentionally forcing it onto somebody else's property, and the destruction that is caused by that is actually illegal. It is. So here's what happens in my opinion. Again, I have to keep saying my opinion. So a developer comes in, and I could pick 20 sites off the top of my head where this has happened in Horry County already. So a developer comes in and they put up, say, 200 homes, and the surrounding property is being flooded. Or the surrounding neighborhood, the road is destroyed because all of the construction equipment came in and did all this construction work. So the neighboring community thinks they have no recourse. And places like Island Green, this is the epitome of disaster. But one person bought the property and started developing it. Then they went bankrupt and sold it to another person who continued to develop it. They go bankrupt or otherwise wind up a company, sell it to someone else, and they now are going to develop more. So the new catchphrase is we'll fix the road before we build anything more. So that's West Perry. That is definitely Island Green in multiple locations in Island Green, except the road doesn't get fixed.
And the road is often a private road, is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Now please let me help you guys understand the difference between a county road and a private road. In your opinion, Katrina, is a road an asset or a liability?
Always a liability.
Why is a road a liability?
Because the upkeep, the maintenance, and the care of the road has to be paid for by someone. So county roads are in our budget, although we're 18 million behind to get our roads up to standard at the present day.
So let me stop you there because that's what's important. So is it in the county's best interest to assume a road in a neighborhood or development? Or is it in their best interest to make a developer build a private road?
This is a little bit of a tricky question because if you're a member of a homeowners association, so you have a development that's built and you come in and you buy that home, you assume someone has to care for the road that gets you from the main road to your home. This is a general assumption that everybody would make. I would make it, you would make it.
Absolutely.
So what I've come to understand, and this is a learning process, I don't know all the technicalities, however, so the developer actually keeps control of the road in case they want to develop more later. And this is a very common thing to happen. So when you're buying your house, you don't know, no one is actually responsible for maintaining that road because it's private. And if the road is adopted by Horry County Council, it's only adopted after all the things have been done, the stormwater, the proper macadam, or I don't know what you call it.
Yes.
You know,
Basically what you're saying is the road has to be built to county standards before the county will adopt it.
correct.
Now, with that said, most of these roads and most of these developments are private roads.
Yes.
So, the homeowner's left with a road that may be disintegrating because of more development driving over the road. They have little recourse except for to shell out through their HOA to fix the road ongoing.
But they can't, so this is the other interesting caveat to this. So the homeowners association doesn't exist in a lot of these
That's
issues.
true too.
This is the bigger problem. So
The developer actually manages the HOA until they turn it over to them.
right, until every lot is sold.
Correct.
And even then, in the case of Rum Bluff, I think the current in writing issue says that they have control of that road until 2048.
Right.
So Colonial Charters and Rum Bluff, and I hope I have these right because I don't.
And these are North Myrtle Beach, Longs area developments.
This is Long's area off
Right.
Route 9, where I tell you, and I would love to hold a little poll like you do for football, because I could tell you 90% of what will flood in the next big storm. I have maps that look at every issue. If I can predict what's going to flood, everyone in this county, especially planning and development, stormwater, these departments should clearly know that these particular areas will flood. Why FEMA does not get involved in this is beyond me. And a very interesting thing that's come up this week is there are 4 insurance companies that have pulled out of Horry County in particular. Why in late July would insurance companies be pulling out of this county? Well, like me, and I was an insurance agent and I am well versed on actuaries, we're gonna have a big storm and there are gonna be a lot of very big claims. So if they pull out now in July, you're forced to get a new insurance company, you're forced to pay top dollar to change, and it's because they know they're going to be hit with massive claims sometime soon. So we have these developments, and I'm gonna stick with Rum Bluff for the minute because it's so blatantly clear to me. Colonial Charters is looking to develop behind Rum Bluff, and they need access roads. And so the developer has not only just made a lot of money on the development, so the developer has just made a great deal of money on the development. He's basically holding the homeowners hostage now because he has control of the road. Now, they bought into, let's say 100 homes. I don't know how many are actually there, but let's just say they bought into a community that has 100 homes, a beautiful pool, and a nice atmosphere. Except behind them, they're talking about 200 or 300 more homes that they were not aware of, and that traffic is going to come straight through their development, and they have no say in it because the developer still owns the road. And if the developer
And he's still managing the HOA.
still managing through Triad, or I don't know who the company is,
Correct.
but they have in writing that they have control until 2048. So they're going to make money when Colonial Charters needs a second ingress and egress, which they will. Then Rum Bluff, whoever the owners of Rum Bluff and those private roads are going to sell that right over to Colonial Charters, making another chunk of money on the backs of the people who live there and bought under the assumption they were going to have a nice, quiet little community.
So hold on. Now, I'm guessing if you're watching this, if you've hung in here this long, you're probably frustrated, you're probably angry, you might be confused. So what we want to do, and I want to make very clear here, residents first. That's what this program's about. And what a lot of people will do at this juncture is they'll want to get into the blame game. Who's to blame? I want to say this to our viewers. We're all to blame. Only 21% of people in Horry County care about politics. Of that 21%, about half are in some colluded relationship with government. They're going to vote. About 8 to 9% of you guys are either contracted with government, work for government, colluded with government. You not only vote, you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to launch campaigns. That leaves about 12% of you guys. That's what's voting. While only 21% care about politics, 100% of you guys care about government when things go wrong. So, we can blame your county councilman. We can blame planning and zoning. We can blame INR. We can blame the developers. It's sort of an insider game, but ultimately the only way to keep it from being an insider game is for you folks to want to be informed, number one, and number two, to want to participate. Now, there's a saying in purchasing anything, it's called caveat emptor, buyer beware. When you're moving here or when you live here, all of these things are going to affect the quality of your life. Not what's going on in Washington, we don't care about what the FBI, the CIA, listen, we're not one of those type of news organizations. This stuff will affect your life. So, it's important to have these discussions with your neighbors. Not necessarily to take a pitchfork down to wherever and burn something down, but so that key people can get involved in the process. You clearly have gotten involved in the process. You will not be liked for it. Why? Did I mention that this is a $38 billion annual business? You're messing with someone's $38 billion annual business. But what you really want is fairness. You want fairness from truthfulness, transparency, and fairness. From the day the first shovel is stuck in the ground till the project is completely finished, you want to know that everything was done in a way that's for the betterment of the entire county. So, which means you, by the way. So, Katrina, first of all, is being informed enough?
No, because most people are not informed, and I'm not making anybody, one particular person, and blaming any particular entity, but the big thing that bothers me the most about Horry County development is that the primary person buying here is not from here. So you have people like myself who may have moved here at some point from the north, Ohio, Canadians. We have people that come from everywhere who are purchasing the homes here. If you live and were born and raised in Horry County, you know about the lowlands, you know about wetlands. There is no one born and raised here who doesn't understand the issues that are here in the county. So when you come from out of town, you don't know to ask, was my home built on wetlands? And this particular individual who spoke this week at Horry County Council actually did her due diligence and looked into a lot of this. So she was from the north. She bought a beautiful home. This is in Island Green, and they bought in July of 18.
Wow.
So they closed only a week before Florence hit. Now her home did not flood, but the end of the street she lives on, 4 full homes flooded to the whole first floor. So at the time she bought her home, she was not in a flood zone. Keep in mind, that was a week before Florence. So 2 years on, she is now in a flood zone because FEMA has redone the flood maps. So now she finds herself in a flood zone, and now she finds herself knowing the next big storm, she is going to flood. All the other houses on the street flooded. She was missed by feet. It came up to their doors, they put sandbags, so they didn't get water in the home. But they're well aware they're going to this time. The next big flood they will. So being informed is not enough. You have to, I don't think we can put the onus on the buyer here. I think it's desperately distressing to say what's going on in Horry County is not beneficial to the residents when it comes to building these fill-in builds, as you call them, or draining the wetlands, because we're just redirecting water. We are not making the water go away. That's not possible. So during the election, a lot of people were saying to me, you can't control flooding. You can't control the weather. And that obviously is true, but you can build smarter and you can plan more intelligently so that when someone spends all of their money to buy a home where they want to live out the rest of their lives, they're not going to flood. And they shouldn't have to worry about being misinformed. And I'm going to intentionally avoid using the word lied to, although in my opinion, if you tell me something untrue, that's what it is. But we're going to say uninformed or misinformed because no one's required to tell you you've been built on wetlands.
No, but if you're going to be buying in Horry County, there's something called a genealogy of a person. Look up the land's genealogy. Ask this question. Was this property ever built on wetlands? Did wetlands ever exist here? And I'll say this to you as a buyer. I'd say get it in writing. Have the real estate agent put it in writing. There were never any wetlands on this property. Now, you say, wow, David, that's onerous. No, it's not. That's a fair question. Make sure you buy what's called land on high ground. High ground means you won't flood unless obviously there's a swamp near you. But there's a reason people are building on wetlands now. It's because we've run out of high ground near the coast. Those are just facts.
And having high ground is also not enough. How did you get the high ground? So I mean this.
Well, yes, of course, if you did a fill and build, you have high ground. But if you fill and build, there's probably a wetland there at some point.
Exactly.
So the key question to ask your realtor is, were these once wetlands? Because that's a yes or no answer. That's not a complicated question.
No, but a realtor is not going to know that. And this goes.
They're not going to know it. But I'll say this to you. Put the onus on them. Ask them. Look it up. Find out for me. I'm not going to buy a home that was anywhere near our own what was once wetlands, because that's the standard we need to start holding these agents to, and this industry to. They'll stop building on them if we start holding them accountable. If we start asking the hard questions at the time of purchase, things are going to change. And if you don't, ask your real estate lawyer to look into it. You've got a lawyer doing the closing for you. Have him look into whether or not this was built on previously existing wetlands. You have a right to know. You shouldn't have a post-purchase reality. A post-purchase reality is a oh goodness. Am I right?
Well, I'm gonna share a little insight into that because I forgot. When I first came to Horry County in 2015, I was living in Ireland, and so I was looking online at properties and then coming over and viewing them. I went to contract twice before buying my current home. And one particular home, which was in Conway on the river, I loved the house, right on the river, had its own boat launch, and I was so excited to buy this home. Now, I thought I was doing everything I needed to do And only a week before closing, I could still not get an insurance coverage. So I kept calling the agent.
Well, that raises red flags a little bit.
Exactly,
Yeah.
maybe for some people, and I hesitate in saying, but I was paying cash. And the realtor said to me, well, you're paying cash. What do you care if you can get an insurance policy? The closing's in 3 days.
Mhm.
And I said, I need, apparently, now realize I'm not from Horry County, I don't know anything about this stuff. And this was a beautiful home that I desperately did want. It was perfect. And so I flew in, the closing was only 3 days away, and I was told I needed an elevation cert in order to get the insurance put through. So I called the real estate agent, I called multiple people, could not get an elevation cert. It turns out I had to get in contact with the Army Corps of Engineers in order to get this cert. And 2 days before closing, I was informed the house was not only, it wasn't in a flood zone, it's in the path of the river. And no cert would be issued and no insurance could be gotten. Now, the listing agent, and I'm not gonna say her name, but she was a *1 agent in Horry County, #1 agent in Horry County that year.
I believe you.
Knew this. 2 other closings had gone bad for the very same reason, and this was never disclosed to us, never a word mentioned about it, and it is only because I did my job in ensuring I would never buy a property that I could not get insurance coverage on. And no one should ever do that, just let me say, if anyone suggests it, bail from whatever you're doing.
Yeah, even if you're paying cash, make sure that what you are buying is insurable.
Yeah.
And make sure it's insurable at an affordable rate.
At an affordable rate is right. Because another property which was on the beach side of the intercoastal, again, we went to contract the second time on a property on the beach side, and after inspection found out that it had shifted off its foundation by 1.5 feet. And it was 2 real estate agents who owned the property and were selling it to us. How they didn't know their own property was shifted 1.5 feet off the foundation, I find shocking, but that went south. So I don't think trusting the word of an insurer or of a realtor, and I love realtors, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. A realtor tells you something, you still have an obligation to find out if that's accurate information. If you're gonna spend $300,000 on a home, and many of us have or will.
That's the average price of a home in Horry County right at this moment.
I can remember as a kid, $100,000 was a lot of money.
For a home, it really was.
Growing up. And when I became an adult and had children, $200,000 was a massive amount of money.
Correct.
At that time, I'm talking 35 years ago. So now, no one blinks at $300,000.
Correct.
But if you lose that $300,000 and you have no recourse, because a lot of us are retired and can afford to pay cash. Maybe you're using your retirement money, or
maybe you flipped your home back,
sold your home, and
you're paying
that was
cash.
your investment. That was
Correct.
everything for your future.
Correct.
And I would like to help people not be in that position. In my purpose or my work right now throughout Horry County, and this is not just because of an election. You know yourself, I didn't go to an election wanting to be a politician. I went to an election because I was ineffective at getting powers that be to make changes to protect the citizens. So my job and my purpose these days is informing citizens and helping them understand the process, what it means when there's a red and orange sign, or I don't know if they're red and yellow. When you see a planning sign in in a neighboring property, that means somebody's going to be developing there. And if you don't know to go to the meeting to find out what that is,
correct.
Somebody could put up a 12-story high-rise in your backyard and you didn't even know how or when that happened or how the process for that to happen works. So it's a very convoluted process and way of doing things that is for even me to understand sometimes. So the average person who has no knowledge, who doesn't understand what the sign is, there's a date on it, you have to go at that date and time to hear what they're going to do or proposing. And unfortunately, I don't mind saying this very publicly, that's already been predetermined. So developers may have been working on a project for a year, and they bring this to what's called the planning workshop, and a week later is when the public is invited to come and give their input. Now, developers, engineers, the Horry County Planning, they've had months, sometimes years, working on projects and investing money into projects that have not been approved by the public.
And lawyers have been extremely involved in the process.
Absolutely.
All the way
The
through.
whole way. So when it comes to planning commission and you have 300 people, you think, okay, our community doesn't want this, or we're absolutely not going to have this right where we live. We want to have a community that we signed on for. I say that you buy a house, you think it's going to be a lovely rural area, or you think that it's going to be a certain protected wetlands behind you, and then all of a sudden you find out that a developer is going to develop 700 homes. Or in an instance that we are looking at right now, this land was condemned and never to be built on, but a little bit of time passes and all of a sudden we're going to build on it. So
and we're talking about the Legends track there, what's called Sago.
So
it's called Sago and
No.
it's Lennar, beside the Sago property, right. and on the backside, Paramount, which is not supposedly active at the moment, but it's been drained, which is bizarre. You're right.
People thought they were going to have a wetlands buffer. They think you have a wilderness and a beautiful natural area outside where you're living, and when you buy, you're told no one will ever build there. If someone ever tells you that, this is another thing I find interesting, it's never going to be built on. So this particular tract, which is Lennar, at this point was 300 acres of Dr. Holmes's property. It was mined during the building of 31, and now they're going to develop it. So I say, wait a second, our tax-paying dollars paid someone 18+ million to never develop the property, but now it's going to be developed. Do we get that 18.5 million back?
And it was on condemned land. It's on condemned land.
Right, the land is
So-
condemned, so
let me, we need to wrap things up here, Katrina, but let me just, last piece, which I want to get to. So you bought a home now, you've done your due diligence, you've made certain that it was never on a wetland, and you've made certain that the areas around it are going to be developed responsibly. Now, last piece. There's a new bill currently in Florida that's running through that says you can't build new stuff, new houses, without the infrastructure already being planned, roads, police, fire services. They're going to pass a law in Florida, supposedly, it hasn't passed yet, that says you can't add new building until you have the infrastructure in place. Is that something else Horry County residents need to consider when they're buying at a certain location, the infrastructure around it?
Well, there's so many things that are encompassed by what we say infrastructure.
Well, let's just talk about Highway 90.
So
I bought a home on Highway 90. I bought it before they built International Drive. Let's say I bought it 15 years ago. They built International Drive, which is an expressway to the beach with no lights. You can only drive 45 on it, but it's still an expressway. And all of a sudden, one neighborhood after another starts popping up beside me on a 2-lane road. Now the road is, as we all know, gridlock. What could I have done to prepare myself for that?
Well, buyer beware again. So I would not buy without driving around an environment before I choose something. But as you well know, 17 and 90 in Little River is now a gridlock disaster too.
Correct. It's all gridlock because we don't have enough.
7 years ago, but now it is.
We're 20 to 30 years behind on highway infrastructure.
But the little roads, and it's not just International Drive, Highway 57 is a 2-lane road.
Disaster.
The risk to life and safety of the public is so outrageous.
Correct.
There are so many, I could come up with so many other roads within the county. So I think that the county council and the planning commission, INR, everyone needs to look at this and say, wait a second, we have allowed a drastic overbuild at this point. Overdevelopment is absolute. No one, I don't think anybody would say that's untrue, even
Correct.
the governmental people.
Correct.
So what do we do about it? Do we continue allowing the builds, or do we say, and someone did say this, I don't know if it was Harold Worley or someone said it, to not stop development, but force the infrastructure to have a faster pace and the development to have a slower pace. That's not stopping development. That's being intelligent and doing the job that everyone has, because it's not just the government. We have this job too, to put public safety first.
But we opened this whole discussion up with the reality that a commercial property or a home is an asset to government because they can tax it. We also said that a road was a liability. It's something that must be maintained, upkept, and quite frankly, councilmen would rather see a new piece of property that's taxable, so would bureaucrats, and they would like to see a road that they've got to maintain, repair, and keep up to certain standards. How do we as residents hold county, and I think county council can be held responsible here, for allocating the funds they're receiving towards continually keeping infrastructure abreast or near. I know we're 20, 30 years behind, but how do we hold them accountable for catching us up?
Well,
do you vote?
Voting's not enough really, because I think the words gross negligence are going to start popping up.
So, Sue.
I think, I wish that weren't a word.
You hate the word Sue.
You absolutely know I do. So, I think people need to compromise and get something moving in the right direction, but people are going to die. People are dying on our roads. People are dying for different reasons. And at what point do we say this could have been prevented? The car accidents, or, when you look at Island Green, it is the best. If anybody looks at this, and please, I'm really asking everybody, Island Green is the epitome of this problem. How does a fire truck get back there? How does an ambulance get back there?
Please.
These people's lives are actually in jeopardy, in my opinion. Of all the places I've gone in the county, this is the most despicable and disgraceful public safety nightmare. And no one, when you're buying a house, you don't know this. But for me, I say, look, we need to sit down. You think that the public is involved with county council, but they're not involved enough. The people, this past week, there are a great number of citizens at the county council meeting, but I really am urging people, and I will continue to do this. It's the first Monday and the first Thursday of the month. County council, the meeting is held 6 o'clock every time. It's the same time of night, 6 o'clock, in Conway, 1302 2nd Avenue, Conway. Come and see how things are done. Come and listen to how these things work and take place, because voting is not enough. Coming to these meetings and understanding that you do have a say.
Well, hold on, because I'm gonna make the whole circle back now. Assumed rights. Once again, we call this program, as you can see, residents first. Government now assumes it has certain rights. Question is this: do you assume you have certain rights? The Constitution says you have unalienable rights endowed by your Creator. Do you actually believe that? Because when I was a kid growing up in Horry County, if I got in trouble, the authority, as far as government was concerned, school, police, was my daddy. You did not want to go home and find out that someone from the school had called your daddy. Today, that's not necessarily how we do things. Daddy may not have any authority as far as the government's concerned, and I'm not going to get into it now, but if you look at certain agencies, the family unit is not considered the authority that it was. So what are your rights? do you assume you have any? Because if you don't, then all of this is going to happen to you. You have to assume you have certain unalienable rights, and these rights are yours. And we have to start putting residents first in all things, because I believe residents can be trusted. Government sees some residents as a nuisance, especially if they speak out and talk about their rights. I don't have a problem with those residents at all. In fact, I adore them.
I would just like to add something to that. There are three things I hope everybody knows and understands. With rights are not absolute, and I say that for a reason, but with every right there is a responsibility. So when I say rights are not absolute, you will hear people, county developers, anybody saying, well, landowners have rights, and they do, but rights are not absolute. So you may have a right to develop your property, but you do not have the right to disrupt your neighbor in the process.
Or build on a wetland.
Right. So there are, with every right, first of all, no, rights are not absolute. So we're a society, and a civilized society with a constitution. So everyone has rights, and they have conflict sometimes.
But the rights that are at most conflict today, in my opinion, is the assumed rights of government superseding the assumed rights of individuals. And government is well versed at stating what its rights are. We tend to take the position of maybe I don't have rights, or maybe as I go and start exploring my rights, I get the runaround. It's not my fault, it's the developer. It's not the developer's fault, it's government. It's not the government, it's I. You can chase this chicken around the chicken coop sometimes for weeks, months, years. You realize all of a sudden, well, my rights are supposedly there, but I don't even know where to go, and because it's deliberately and intentionally no one's fault. But it is someone's fault. And I'm going to say, ultimately, it's our fault for letting them get away with it.
Well, and I'm going to say, hopefully we might end on this note, I'm going to say that if you look at the organizational chart of Horry County, and it's probably every county in the state and country, the citizen is first. Before the county council, before any member of government, if you look at that organizational chart and you see the citizen is the first thing on it, we need to bring that back to fruition, bring that back to reality, because the citizen should be the first thing, the first concern, the first thought, and that hasn't been the case here in a very long time.
Long time. So, thanks for watching. Katrina, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
You've been very informative. We're going to be continuing to run episodes like this every week. I will be off. We'll be off the week of the 25th. But other than that, we'll be continuing to run these every week. They'll come to you either on Thursday afternoon or Friday morning, most likely Friday mornings weekly. And we look forward to joining you guys. We invite you into the conversation. You can share your comments below. You can also sound off. We would love to have some of you guys on here. Tell us what you think, because if we're going to engage and we're going to be active in our communities, we have to do just that. We need large masses. We need all of you engaged, because you do have rights.
Oh, can I make a quick plug there?
Oh, make a plug.
So, sometime in the coming weeks, this is taking a bit longer than thought, but there is a new organization called the Horry County Agenda. You can go, not quite yet, the website will be launched. It's the Horry County, just like that spelled, the HorryCountyAgenda.com, and it is a civic activism group to help citizens be more informed about the procedures and processes for building and development in Horry County.
And you're going to hear us continue to plug that, because that's a great place to plug in. Once again, Katrina, thank you. Guys, we look forward to seeing you next time.